Hi, hello, this is Dr. Madeleine Muller, and welcome to the Master Your Dragon series, where we are looking at advanced skills in emotional competence. So we're currently busy with Module 4, and in Module 4A, we looked at our unhappy dragons. So what happens when we are experiencing distressing emotions and how that affects our behavior. I now want to focus on a more pleasant topic, which is the basic pleasant emotional affective states that human beings can experience and what we are like when we are happy. So the pleasant emotions are quite different from the distressing emotions in terms of how it involves the brain. So the distressing emotions are very typically based within the survival brain, and they basically get created to help us deal with some sort of threat. That's why they're unpleasant. They have a biological impulse to act in a specific way to keep us safe. And so what actually happens when we're in this survival mode, we're actually cutting out a lot of our higher functions. We certainly don't have our prefrontal cortex present, and we only have very specific parts of our cognitive brain to help us make quick decisions. So not the brightest part of ourselves. But this is different for the pleasant emotions. So the pleasant emotions actually has to do when we are not stressed, we are not in survival mode. They also have to do with our dragon drive. So they also certainly involves our endocrinological system and our feeling side, but the whole brain is at our is available to us. So it doesn't cut off the prefrontal cortex, it doesn't cut off our cognitive functions. And so therefore the pleasant emotions is actually when we are at our best. So when we are happy, we are more intelligent, we are obviously more patient, and we have access to all these higher cognitive virtues. But similar to the distressing emotions, there are only really a few very basic primal happy states, and then those states then can combine in various ways and can get cognitively extended in various ways to give us a whole very wide range of different kinds of pleasant and positive emotions. So we're going to just have a look at those three. There's a fourth one, lust, which is also a positive emotion, but very much actually belongs to our subconscious. And lust is going to have a whole separate session of its own, so we're not going to cover it in this presentation. So let's look at the first one, which is the affective emotional state of care. And this is whenever we feel attachment to another person or another living thing. What we talk about is love, what we talk about is bonding, what we talk about as nurturing somebody else. So when you are caring for somebody else or you are being cared for, you experience this pleasant emotional state we call care. And we actually, the hormone that's very much mediated here is oxytocin, as well as obviously some endorphins. And I'm going to use the analogy by Emily Nagoski, who's written a beautiful book about relationships. She describes these emotions that was initially described by Panksepp, and she calls them rooms, which is why I like that idea that we have these emotional rooms we can spend time in. And there are three different types of emotional rooms that has this care function. The one is sort of the kitchen, and that is when we are nurturing, for example, a child, reading a child a bedtime story, or if you're caring for an elderly parent, or if you're a nurse, for example, caring for a patient. Those kinds of care is sort of a non-hierarchical type of care. And then there's the living room. That's when we are in a scenario of care with friends or with peers, with colleagues. And then, of course, is the bedroom, which is the kind of care we feel with an intimate partner. And oxytocin has a very particular physical attraction picture, which we will cover in a different section when we talk about intimate partners and relationships. I do want to love, so Emily Nagoski has got this beautiful description of what she calls trust in a relationship. And in a long-term relationship, whether it is with an intimate partner or with a child or in any scenario where there is care, we can speak of trust is when you know that somebody is there for you. So she talks about, are you there for me? A-R-E, it's a mnemonic. For, are you emotionally available to somebody? Are you emotionally responsive to somebody? And are you emotionally regularly engaged with somebody in that relationship? And when we have somebody where we know that they're there for us, they've got our back, then that creates this trust, which very much lives within this care affective state. So I thought I'd have a little word about love, because love is one of those huge words in our literature, in our movies, seems to be one of the big things that the world revolves around. And I love the way Emily Nagoski talks about love. And now she's talking specifically about love in an intimate partner relationship. And for her, a love relationship, the thing that really encompasses what love encompasses, she describes in three different aspects. And the first one is attraction. And this attraction, this emotional attraction, is this care part that we're talking about. So that is the part where you have this endocrinological response to somebody else. But actually, love, in terms of something that takes place over time, also require us to have admiration for the person that we are with, and then this lovely trust, being emotionally available, responsive, and engaged with somebody else. And so you can imagine there's a lot of confusion, because quite often when people talk about love, for example, when they have a crush on somebody or when they're newly in a relationship, what they're actually only talking about still is the attraction part. Because admiration and trust is only really something you can build over time as you get to know somebody well. So care also underlies a lot of these higher virtues that we have available to us through our prefrontal cortex. So if we have this higher view of looking at the world, we are able to then have compassion, openness, warmth towards others, and empathy becomes possible within this care space. And we also use care, and care is an important part of certain skills. So if you care for somebody, it will affect your communication skills, it will affect your conflict resolution skills. It's important in any realm of counseling or pastoral care, or anywhere where you're actually providing care for another person. And therefore, it's a very important emotional state in some of the big roles we have in our lives. So in your role as a parent, in your role as a child to a parent, in your role as a partner to somebody else, or as a friend, as a colleague, and also in some of our professions, like as a healthcare provider or as a teacher. If you're in the emotional state of care when you are providing services to somebody, that has an effect on that role that you are in. And it's important to understand that this is really only available as your authentic self. You cannot care for somebody else if you are either stressed and in fear or rage or anger. And I think it's a little bit to realize that this is a happy state. When we are caring for somebody else and when somebody else is caring for us, we have emotions that we would call things like we are contented, we can feel joy, we would feel love, we would feel loved. These are all aspects of this care space. And we need to look a little bit in our life, how do we create enough possibilities for care? The second emotion I want to cover is play. And Panksepp talks about play as the activity done for its own sake. This is where fun and joy lives. And this is any activity. This can be from the arts, from sports, from games, from going on a lovely hike, from reading, from any kind of thing. You go out dancing, when you're at a party. All of this is to do with this thing of doing something for the pure joy and sake of doing that particular thing. And actually play is an important part of our community building. So obviously you can play by yourself and do things that you do yourself that you enjoy as part of relaxation, but play is a huge part of how we build society. So, and you'll see there's a whole lot of hormones involved in play. There's endorphin, dopamine, oxytocin, endocannabinoids. And that oxytocin, for example, is there when we're on a scenario where we're playing with other people. And it's interesting, one can philosophize a little bit about this, of how you distinguish it from entertainment. So an entertainment, for example, a good example would be playing Candy Crush. So if you're sitting and playing Candy Crush on your phone, for example, every time you get something right, get ahead in the game, you get a little dopamine hit, which is a little reward system that we have when you are successful or something, or when you are doing something. That sort of vaguely feels as if you're playing. But actually on that level, it's a very superficial part of this emotion of what I'm talking about, the affective state, the affective emotional state of play, which has actually more to do with this joy of enjoying it. And we have to differentiate a little bit that we don't end up filling our life with too much mindless entertainment that's only giving us a bit of a dopamine hit. So the emotion of play, or the affective state of play, makes other capacities possible, like flexibility and adaptability, and gives us these amazing capabilities, for example, to be able to be creative, to be able to be innovative, and even self-regulation. So if you have games that you play, for example, sports that you play with other people, or even touch games that gets played on the playground, following the rules, staying within, makes the game more fun. And actually being able to sort of work with somebody else within making the game work, there's something within that that actually is also good for us in terms of how we learn to work together as human beings. A very important part of childhood development is how to bring in healthy opportunities for play. So within play and society, this is really when we talk about culture and the things we do that creates our culture, all of this is based in this space or this emotional space of play. All of the arts, so our visual arts, performance arts, music, whether it's a rock concert or going to a symphony orchestra, all of our creative writing, all of those spaces are spaces where we as humans really live within this beautiful affective state. And definitely being able to build in times in your day and in your life when you play also makes us more resilient. There is something that is good for us physically when we are in the play state, and there's actually quite a lot of evidence in terms of the benefits of play in resilience. And of course, this and play also then contributes to a whole range of more complex emotions, but pure joy really loves within this play space, but also feelings like optimism and enthusiasm can also live within our experience of play. So the third emotion is a lovely one because we forget about this one. Panksepp calls it a seek, and he bases it a little bit on the animal kingdom. So within the animal kingdom, you will know when animals get into a new space or a new area, think of your cat or your dog, they'll go around sniffing and touching and looking at everything. We have a natural curiosity to explore our environment, to try and find possible resources or advantages in the environment, and obviously to look out for dangers. But that in the human being has actually been very strongly linked to our own frontal lobe development. And so we have quite a large part of our cognitive facilities are linked to this affective state of figuring stuff out, exploration, curiosity, learning new things, anything to do with research, anything to do with studying or furthering your own knowledge about something. All of that is the seek space. And again, it's a positive affective space. It's a space where you are going, oh, that's interesting, or I want to learn more about that, or revelations as you discover things. And this is the key to much of human endeavor. So a lot of our development as a human race in terms of science has come through this seek affective state. And if we think about learning, so if we think about our schools and our universities, the vehicle for learning, the space in which we learn the most is if we are in this emotional space called seek. So if you're in the emotional space of being curious and interested, that's where you're going to be learning the most. So the higher virtues that seek then contributes to is this curiosity and inquiry into the world. And it builds very strongly with our cognitive capacities of problem solving, of analyzing, of research and innovation, and very much within the world of teaching and mentoring. And what's quite extraordinary is that if you are seeking together, so if you have groups of people working together, especially if they are very diverse, bringing different sets of skills, that becomes a real powerful tool in the human evolution in terms of innovation and growth for us as human beings. So that's just interesting to then think about it in terms of our educational spaces and our workspaces. We often look at curriculums in terms of what we think we need to teach kids. So we have our lists of stuff we think they need to be able to learn or need to be able to do, but we don't talk always quite enough about how do we create a space where we create this affective emotional state. So this is an emotion, being in the seek state. How do we create that state in our schools, in our universities, in our workplaces, where we stimulate curiosity and wonder, and therefore create the ideal space for learning? And similarly, when we're giving feedback, if you're in a scenario where you're giving feedback even on something like a test, or you're in a scenario in medicine, we give feedback to doctors, for example, when they're discussing patients with us, how do we create this seek emotional state where we go, oh, that's really interesting, and I want to learn more about that. I think I might go and read up about that, rather than creating an experience of fear or even grief or anger when we are giving feedback in terms of learning spaces. And I think this is something we can really develop better. And of course, the emotions linked to seek is very much feelings of satisfaction when you figure something out or when you've learned something, and inspiration, getting excited and enthusiastic about things. So here are our reflection exercise. And just like we did with the distressing emotions, with the pleasant emotions, I want you to imagine a little bit when you look at your day, maybe look at a typical day in your week in this past week and think, well, how much of my day do I spend within that care space, in a happy space of taking care of somebody else, in the play space where I'm doing something and enjoying it for the sake of it, or in a seek space where I'm problem solving or figuring things out, or sorting out information in something that's exciting me. I mean, of course, these also combine. So, for example, as a doctor, I will be my best doctor if I am in my consulting room and I'm in a care and a seek space. So I'm caring about what's happening with my patients, and I'm interested and curious about how to help them solve the challenges that they bring. And that's going to change my consultation considerably, but it's also going to change the way I feel about my day by the time I've spent 8 hours, if I'm in these positive, affective states. As I've mentioned, lust is also one of these positive emotional rooms, and we'll talk about that when we talk about intimate partners. So have a little bit of a thought in terms of where you are, and then start thinking, well, how do I get into these spaces? What inspires me? What pulls me into these spaces? And how do I make time to actually speak, to be in these wonderfully pleasant states? And this is the route to happiness. There we go. The answer to how to be happy. Thank you very much. In this little module 4, we'll be looking actually at emotional regulation.